So here we have 4 minutes to recap the entirety of Sophie Hardy and the Internet Implant. Let's go. The story begins with a prologue set 10 years ago on the day that people have come to know as the departure. In it, a lady called Jane is debating whether to flick a switch which will have some sort of effect on a baby called Clara and her mum and dad. Jane flicked the switch, but nothing happened except Clara's eyes turned bright white. Then she flicked it again and Clara's parents disappeared and a family of mythical creatures. Oh, and the sky also changed colour. 10 years later, and the main story begins, Sophie Hardy is stuck living a mundane life in her 12th floor flat with her mum Amelia, dad Tom and baby sister Lizzie at the very end of the long summer holiday. She really wants to have a gadget that almost every adult in the world has, the Internet Implant. This would give her access to any fact in the world. Sophie also misses her cousin Clara, who has disappeared at the start of the 6-week holiday. Lo and behold, on Sophie's first day back at school, her head teacher, Mr. Houghton, has arranged for the world's smartest man, Alton King, owner of the company who designed the Internet Implant Shadow, along with his lesser-known counterpart, Dale Nathan, to come to school and give out the world's first Internet Implant for children. Sophie's best friend, Yasmin, is chosen to be the first child to get one, and Sophie has to go after Mr. Houghton's son, Reuben, is also given one. While Sophie is getting hers, her other friend, Katie, watches on as the implant seems to go wrong, and Sophie has visions of her missing cousin Clara lying in some glass cage unable to get out. Upon waking up, Miss Sissons, Sophie's teacher, seemed desperate to find out if Clara had given Sophie a message, but Sophie was so nervous about how Miss Sissons was asking she kept quiet. The next day back at school, everyone in the world's Internet Implant suddenly knocks them out and Sophie has yet more visions of Clara and a red light appears in the corner of her eye. After digesting what has happened, Sophie and Yasmin decide to leave Katie and go and ask Mr. Houghton what he knew about the implantation process and why the school was chosen. Upon asking him, though, he suddenly takes an interest in Clara, but then Miss Sissons interrupts the meeting and drags the girls out of the office. She then explains that she works for a secret agency that used to control the behaviour of the Mythicals and that she was responsible for their disappearance 10 years ago. It turns out that Miss Sissons is Jane from the prologue. Miss Sissons then explains that Sophie and Yasmin have both a special implant that allows them to send an avatar of themselves anywhere in the world, so the three zone out to Shadow. Also working at Shadow is Alton King, who seems determined to get Clara back, and after a bit of exposition where it turns out that Mr. Houghton is actually Dale Nathan, the former business partner of Alton King at Shadow, who's been banished by King because of his desire to seek fame, Sophie and Yasmin are sent out to find Clara. They find her zoned out on her bed in something called the Nightmare Program, where she's been forced to live out her own worst nightmare for 6 weeks in real time, but 6 months in her own head thanks to an invention that Miss Sissons calls time dilators. Back at Shadow, Clara then upgrades Sophie and Yasmin's implants so that their avatars can touch things, and then the three go after Houghton/Nathan. He sits everyone down in his office and the group all zone out into Shadow. King and Nathan then have a huge argument about whether the agency should have gone public years ago. Sophie sees that Nathan would sell his own son to get rich and famous, so goes and retrieves Reuben from school. He also appears in Shadow and witnesses his dad say exactly this. Back at school, Alton King's avatar turns up and kidnaps Mr. Houghton whilst temporarily trapping the others in Shadow. When they all get back to school, the children breathe a sigh of relief, but then notice that Katie isn't at school. Suddenly, a message comes through from Miss Sissons that someone is trying to break into the maximum security prison that houses all the mythical prisoners from years gone by. The children assume it is an escaped Dale Nathan, but are unable to go and find out. When the end of the day arrives, Sophie, Clara and Yasmin all zone into Zapville. They creep their way through the creatures, but are stopped by an Incantade who asks where Clara's real dad is. The girls then just about make it through a hidden door where they find Katie typing at a keyboard ready to unleash all the mythicals on the world once more. The girls cannot find a solution to the problem that gets them all out alive, and so Sophie decides the only way would be to let the creatures go. As a result, she knocks Katie out with the time dilator and lets all the mythicals out. The girls then put Katie into a car to take her home, but this never gets there and Katie then vanishes. Sophie, Clara and Yasmin rename Shadow as Scope, special children who oversee and protect Earth. In the epilogues, a woman called Esmeralda is being locked up in Zapville by Jane 10 years ago because a mythical creature known as a changeling was about to spirit her son Kingsley away. She then starts having visions of him in her cell, which Jane tells her are the powers of a changeling manifesting themselves inside her. In the second epilogue, Katie and her mum find themselves on a spaceship above Earth with an alien who seems to have some sort of vendetta against humanity. Her name is Condonar. There you have Sophie Hardy and the Internet Implant, recapped in 4 minutes. You are now ready for the second book in the Sophie Hardy saga, Sophie Hardy and the Changeling Hybrid, available from your regular podcast provider and for pre-order soon on Amazon.